Hello, today I'm going to talk about what I'm wearing on camera. Yes, I am braggy and I am a Viking. We're an actor. Hello, today I'm going to talk about what I am wearing on camera. I am braggy and I am a Viking. We're an actor. An enthusiast. Well, first of all, as you can see, I am indeed wearing Viking clothing and attire. I am firstly wearing a woolen hat. It is made out of wool and has some linen thread, tied it all together with a little bit of decoration, not too much. I am then next wearing a very fine grey wool cloak. Now this is actually made from an old army blanket, so it kind of demonstrates where you can find material to make clothing from. This is a very nice wool. It's worn, so it's got that aging to it. And I made it smaller than the average size cloak, as I did not want a large cloak. And you could wear it like this, or you could wrap it around your body and have a belt wrapping around it to keep extra warm. Either is fine, but you do need an iron or some sort of a cloak pin or penannular brooch. Now the cloak itself has got a bit of nice green wool around the edge, tying it all together here when I sewed it some time ago with a blanket stitch. And all together it's a very nice cloak. Now as you can see, I'm wearing a silver Thor's hammer with a silver necklace, kind of like a very fine silver chain. I'm wearing a nice linen tunic or skirtle in the Viking language. That is where we get the word shirt and skirt from. We must remember that a lot of our language comes from the Vikings, and so forth the word shirt and skirt did as well. Now underneath this nice tunic, which has got a bit of decoration around the edge and around the sleeves, I have another fine linen tunic, a very thin one and nicely fitted to me. You know, they weren't all massive clothing, they would have been fitted to the individual and all hand sewn. Now I've got a belt on. I don't carry a axe as I'm indoors at the moment, so I'm not carrying any weapons. I've got them all around me though. Underneath this I'm wearing a pair of woolen trousers. Now to say that in a pair of woolen trousers there's about 13 miles of thread. And of course the linen, the wool would have to been manufactured on a loom to make wool cloth beforehand, and that is a long, you know, time consuming, you know, time. You got to collect the wool. And if you're making linen, you got to collect the flax. Generally there'll be people doing that, and you'll go somewhere that has a market you could buy the linen and wool from. You know, we forget that in the times of the Vikings and the Saxons, there were market towns, and you could travel around England and buy what you wanted to a degree if you got the coin. Now underneath my trousers, well basically I've got a belt holding my trousers up. This is always my number one tip as a wearing actor, because you don't want to be in a battle or on a march and your trousers start falling down. That's happened to me a few times. It's not embarrassing. You just got to adjust your belt as you march along. But if you can prepare and stop that happening beforehand, then that's a great idea. You know, if you can prepare beforehand and have a belt to stop your trousers from falling down, that's great. Now you can have belt loops on the trousers. Some have been found. I don't have any belt loops on any of my Viking trousers. I'm also wearing some leg bindings. You can just see there. These are wool of course, and got a linen thread on the outside under a blanket stitch. And I'm also wearing some Viking sea boots and some Viking socks. Now some people say the sea boots are a little bit later, but these are like a Hedenby design of sea boots. So there must have been that type of design around. Maybe, you know, if you're living in the centre of England in Derby back in the 9th century, you may have never seen a sea boot, but who knows? We don't have a time machine to go back until we get the evidence. I'm not sure on that. But I like wearing my sea boots, they're very comfortable. And you can't, you know, I can't stress enough having a decent pair of Viking shoes when you're doing this as a hobby, you know, spend the money and get yourself a decent pair, because your feet will thank you for it. So that's generally a roundup of what I'm wearing. I hope I've covered everything. You know, I'm just doing this from my memory as I go along. I don't have a script in front of me like a lot of channels do. I just wanted to describe what I'm dressed as and give you my thinking and thoughts on this. So, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more videos talking about Viking clothing, then I suggest you watch the content on the channel. And please remember to like the video and subscribe if you're not subscribed already to the channel. We do love your subscriptions, and you know, take the time to leave a comment in the comments box below and I will read and reply. So it's goodbye from me, goodbye. But I know what you're thinking. You may be saying to yourself, well, you know, it's okay knowing what you're wearing, Bloggy, but what about other Vikings? What if you had a lot of coin and you was very rich? Well, you may have something like this, with some very fine embroidery. Embroidery takes a long time to sew by hand. So there's that sort of thing. And if you have travelled, you may have an Eastern jacket like this one over here. Both are unique designs in the Viking age. Both are wool. This one has a bit of silk, which would have been kite wear and would have came from the east, from, you know, Baghdad and Byzantium. The Vikings did find, you know, the Vikings would have raided places where they could have got silk, but it would have been a very, very rare thing. This old coat here is one that used to belong to Turkey. It is an Eastern style jacket. Now, we often used to refer to this, I don't know why, as the Jimi Hendrix coat of Viking reenacting. I think basically because Jimi Hendrix wore kind of a coat like this. And this is actually getting quite worn now and old in places. I don't wear it often. It could really do with taking apart and having a layer of material adding to strengthen it back up again. But I don't really want to do that. So it's just going to be left for, you know, for old time's sake until another day. And you see on the walls we have a lot of wool and nice linen on the walls. Would they have done that in their longhouses? Well, as you can see in this video of a longhouse where Turkey is telling a story, you won't see the wool on the wall. It's all wood. Now, of course, we're in the modern age and this is a modern bedroom, and you don't want to be seeing that on the wall. And perhaps at some point I may increase the authenticity and have some wood show in the background. If you had the wool spare, yes, I think maybe you may have put a bit on the wall. Certainly you may have tapestries. A lot of the women folk had time to do, you know, the embroidery with tapestries. So perhaps, you know, a bit of wool would have been put on the walls to make your bit of a bedroom nicer. Let's face it, you know, in some of the long houses and Anglo-Saxon houses I've been in, there's gaps in the walls and the wind will get through. A bit of wool defending that, you know, would help. But then again, I think to myself, well, that's quite expensive in those times, and I don't think wool would have hung around that long. It would have been used up, made into hats, clothing, cloaks, tunic and trousers. So I hope that little bonus bit at the end of this video is found to be very useful. And if you've got any suggestions about Viking clothing videos, we can do and film for you. I would like to do some where I demonstrate making them, but that's such a complicated thing to film. But you know, there's always another day and we're here for the long term and not short term on this channel. So who knows, you know, perhaps I will one day on this channel demonstrate how to sew a tunic by hand. You know, the first thing you got to figure out is the pattern, and that's the most important stage of nesting the pattern on your fabric so you don't waste any fabric, because it's expensive today, even more so back in the medieval times. So that's my number one tip, is to make sure you nest your pattern of your clothing correctly. And there are correct ways of doing that. You've got to think about it beforehand. Don't just buy, you know, 4 meters of nice cloth and put it on the floor and cut straight into it. That there would be a mistake to make. because you know you could end up having some fabric offcuts which aren't big enough for a sleeve or big enough for a front of a tunic, depending if it's one piece or two piece. Often they would have been made from one piece of long cloth. Sometimes there would have been two pieces of cloth, so you got a front and a back. So you know, you got to think about these things. And you also got to think about, well, if you're going to edge your tunics with different materials, so that's when the spare material you got left over comes in handy. But again, you got to have the length to make sure that your tunic skirt at the bottom is long enough around for the bit of material you're going to use. You haven't got enough, you can't do it. So it's a, you know, it is not a complicated thing. You just got to think about when you make Viking clothing to get it right in the first place. And you can go way too far into detail of it if you're not careful by counting the stitches per inch. That's too far, you know. Have fun doing it and do it in a group. That's the best way.